Right, so today we're going to be doing an LS400 from a 98 to 2000. That's a 1UZ VVT-i. This one's been adapted and it is going to be working with a automatic gearbox that comes behind the 1UZ VVT-i. So let's get into it. Right, okay, so as discussed, this is a 1UZ-FE VVT-i. It comes from an LS400 98 to 2000 European model. This harness has been adapted, so we've taken the existing harness, we've stripped it, cleaned it, removed everything that wasn't necessary, and we've done all the wiring there with its own fuse box to be a completely standalone engine harness. What we're going to be doing now is I'm going to go through the complete layout of the harness. And I'm also going to go through the wires. There's two plugs that the customers need to connect into their vehicle. So James, that's what you're going to be connecting there. I've got all the paperwork there so we can go through it over there. All right, and then what we're going to do is then we're going to go on to actually testing and running the engine on the stand. And part of the testing is we're going to be testing quite a few things like the gearbox wiring, making sure that is all working as we expect it to. So to start off with, what we're going to do is I'm going to make my way around here. So in terms of the wiring and the actual layout, it's very, very simple. You've got your three plugs there that go off into the engine harness. You've got your one plug there, which is then going to go off to the actual fuse box itself. So that is the entire engine harness. You've then got your three plugs here for the body. This one makes its way separately to the other side of the fuse box there, and these two make their way to the fuse box over there. So that is the sort of engine harness side, if you will, plugging into the fuse box. Once you go up along here, you're going to get to the grommet, and that's the one you're going to put into your firewall. So that's a standard LS400 grommet there. We're going to move our way along here, and we're going to get to the piece of black plastic that bolts down to the back here. Now you'll notice that obviously this is not sitting correctly, and that's mainly because this is a LS430 motor. So this coolant pipe is in the way. They'd normally be together here on your 1UZ VVT-i. So you still have your mounting point, so you still bolt down over there. And in the 1UZ's case, it bolts down over there as well. And then you also have a mounting point down here where it bolts onto your water bridge. So the water bridges are different between the 3UZ and the 1UZ VVT-i for that purpose. Okay. So out of the black plastic here, we'll go up there in a minute, but just there is your starter, what I call the starter knock plug, because it's the little sub harness that goes underneath to your starter motor and your knock sensors. All right, so that just plugs in over there, and that harness is a separate one, which you'll know when you took it all off. Coming out the back down here is where your gearbox harness is going to go. So you'll see it goes all the way down to there. And you'll see we've got our selector plug, our solenoid plug, output speed sensor, and there's our input speed sensor there. So those are the four plugs for the gearbox. Also coming out of here, you're going to have your Lambda sensor, which is just down over there. Now do remember there is a metal plate that goes between the exhaust and there. Please make sure you put that back in. Otherwise this plug is going to last all of 5 seconds because it's going to be basically touching the exhaust. Also coming out of here, you've then got your earth rings that go over here. Now this is actually put in the wrong place. That should actually be there. So you should have an M8 bolt that goes through there, and you'll see that that hole over the top is not going to have anything in. Both the 3UZ and the 1UZ are both these holes, but in the case of the 1UZ, the earth points go over here. All right, we just put it over here so we can put another earth on the cylinder head for there. All right. Now then, what we'll do is we'll come up along here, and you're going to get to your other piece of plastic that's holding all the harness together. So again, bolts in there, bolts in there. Starting from the back, you've got this section over here, and you have injector 7 coming out of there. Then coming forward, coming out of here, we've got injector 5, we've got coil 5, and obviously you can't get them mixed up, but this comes along and that goes to coil 7 over there. All right. Then coming along to here, we've got the next breakout that comes over here, and that's going to be injector 3, coil 3, and your cam sensor on your left bank. All right. Coming out the front here, you've got your little plug for your noise filter, which will screw into a place along there. Okay. And then we come along to here, and then that breaks out of the front of the fuel rail, and that goes to injector 1, it goes to coil 1, and it goes to the oil control valve for the left bank. So that's that plug over there. All right. It then comes a little bit more forward, and you'll see underneath here it breaks out, and it goes to your drive-by-wire motor and your TPS sub harness plugs. Remember, your TPS is actually down in there. This is just a little sub harness they put on the throttle body, so because to get the plug down at the bottom there would be very difficult. So that's your TPS over there. It's going to break off to go to your drive-by-wire and clutch plug over here, and it's also going to break out and go along the top there and end up at your accelerator position sensor. So remember, drive-by-wire with these, so that is just an accelerator position sensor there. All right. Coming a little further down, you're then going to break out and go to your cam sensor, which is just over there. And you're going to follow it down along here, and you're going to see you have clip points here and here to keep the harness away from the fan belt there. Then it's going to come down here, and it's going to break out into two sections. So this one that's got all the heat shrink over is the one that we've added, and that is actually the oil. So in your case, it would come down through here, go here, and then plug into the oil switch that's going to be over there because you've got an LS400. In this case, it's coming down and plugging in over here. The other section that breaks off is the crank sensor plug, as you can see over there. So again, it just goes down through this hole, down through that hole, out through there, and plugs directly into the crank sensor over there. All right, so that's that whole section over there. We're just going to make our way over to the other side now and carry on from there. So following along our black piece of plastic covering here, you'll see we've got another breakout there, and that's going to the other earth switch. And again, same story. This would actually bolt in this bigger hole down here, not the top one over there. All right. Then coming along here, you're going to break out for the first section here. It's going to go to injector 8 and coil 8. So that's nice and straightforward. It's going to come forward along here, and it's going to break out here to go to your ACIS plug. It's going to come to coil 6 and injector 6 as well. Then it's going to come a little bit further along and break out over here. Then we're going to have the cam sensor for the right bank. We're going to have injector 4 and coil 4. Then it's going to come all the way to the front of the fuel rail as per usual, and it's going to break out to a few sections. So one is the coolant temp sensor, which goes down into there. Obviously, we're going to have injector 2 and coil 2, and we're also going to break out to your oil control valve for the right bank. It's going to come a little bit further along here, then it's going to break out, and it's going to go to your mass airflow sensor. Now, obviously, these are actually the mass airflow sensor housings from Calvin Glover at Cartoon in New Zealand. So he is actually keeping some stock here with us. So if you guys do want to purchase these, just get in touch, and then we can get you guys sorted out as well. And if there's any other stuff that Calvin Glover and Cartoon NZ does keep in stock that you'd like me to stock here in the UK, please feel free to comment below, and then we can make that happen for you guys as well. All right, then it's going to come down further down here, and then we're going to break out over here, and that's going to go off to your alternator plug over there, and then it's going to carry on down along there, and it's going to go to your Lambda sensor there. Okay, so it's only the two Lambda sensors we're using, just this one and the other one there, not the other ones that are further down the field, just those ones over there. All right, so that is basically the entire layout of the harness. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to go through the two plugs that the customer, in this case James, is going to have to connect up into the vehicle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to the sheets here, and we're just going to go through all of them there, just so we can have a visual representation. I'll go a bit into explaining exactly where they go and why they're connected there. Right, so we have two plugs. We have 9, which is basically the main one to actually get the vehicle started, and it's got a lot of things like the fuel pump start signal in there. Then we have the second plug, which is a 15-pin plug, and that's got things like your OBD2 connector in, and mostly all the gearbox sections, as you'll see when we go through it. All right, so starting from here, pin number 1 is a red 14-gauge wire. So in this case, you'll see it is over here. We've obviously putting power to the system to get it all fired up. So that is a permanent 12-volt supply. The reason it's a permanent 12-volt supply is because the ECU stores the codes. If you connect that to an ignition source, it's going to keep resetting the ECU every single time, and it's going to make diagnostics nigh on impossible to carry out. So do connect that to a permanent 12-volt supply. All right. Then we've got black yellow, which is the starter signal. So that's a very simple one. It just requires a 12 volts when you want the crank to kick over. Now remember, the wire in there is only a 20-gauge wire. That's not actually what's controlling the starter. There is a separate relay inside the system, and that relay is controlling the starter with the neutral park switch. Okay, so that wire there is not going directly to the starter motor. It's just going to the relay to crank that over. So you don't need to run a thick wire for that 20-gauge or even 22-gauge. Absolutely fine. Next one we've got is yellow-green. So yellow-green is going to the temp. So you'll see what I've done here is we've left you a section of wire here. If you take a look down in here underneath there, in your case, you're going to have a bolt in there, but there's a hole where you can put a temperature sensor to fit your vehicle that would work with your one. And so we've included this wiring here that you can then attach to that temperature sensor over there. All right. Now then that's going out and coming out the yellow-green. In our case, we've actually got it connected to our little device that's converting analog signals to MPX to make this IS200 cluster work. So you'll actually see we do actually have a temperature signal coming through there. All right. Okay, next up we got gray, which is your fuel pump. So again, in this case, it's leaning out there because we obviously got to connect it to our fuel pump over there to get the engine running. But again, nice and straightforward. The ECU is controlling the fuel pump. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to leave a link in the top there. That's going to explain to you exactly how they control the fuel pumps and which way Toyota does it differently between certain models and so on. But in this case, LS400, it controls the fuel pump via the relay. All right. Next up, we have got check engine lights. So basically it says what it says on the tin. So it's the yellow, red. We've got it connected to our cluster here so we can actually see that that's working. Now you'll notice in your fuse box, you've got a LED. That's also a check engine light. We do put that in there because not all the time guys will connect that check engine light to their dash first. And if they want to get it started, they can at least do that. And you can read codes and get diagnostic trouble codes through that as well. All right. Then yellow we've got is tach signal. So the ECU itself is giving out a 4-cylinder tach signal. We're actually connecting yellow to here and we're converting it to a 6-cylinder signal for the IS200 dash. So you'll actually see the rev counter working when we start the engine. Then next up, number 7 we've got is black and red. So it's black with a red tracer. That's your ignition feed. Again, nice and simple. That's just the 12-volt ignition from your key barrel if you're using that, or switch if you're using that. If you're using a key barrel, please remember that a key barrel has accessory and ignition. Now accessory cuts power when you go to crank, so don't connect the black red to accessory, otherwise the second you go to crank it's actually going to shut the ECU down and it's never going to start properly. All right. Then number 8 we've got is pink and blue, and that is your charge light. So in this case we've got it hooked up to our LEDs over here, and that's going to show us that the alternator charge light is working correctly. And obviously we'll actually see the voltage on the dash to show us that the alternator is actually charging. Then number 9, yellow black, that's oil pressure. So in this case we're connecting our yellow black to our device here. So you could already see, because the oil pressure switch just gives a ground when it's got no pressure, that the oil light is already working on there, and that will turn off the moment we actually start and run the engine. So that's the main ones, as you can clearly see, so that you can actually get the whole engine running without having to connect anything else. And you don't have to connect all of this. I mean, charge light and oil pressure, etc. You don't have to connect to get it running, but yeah, they're all there. So second plug now is mainly gearbox. And effectively starting from the top, we've got the red blue, so that is reverse. Really nice and simple. It just gives out 12 volts when you're in reverse, and that will then allow you obviously to run your reverse lights. The yellow, now that's PWR mode. So obviously on the original shifters on the LS400, you had a switch for PW or power mode, and you had a momentary switch for snow mode. So we've included those two, so if you do end up using the LS400 shifter, they are there and available for you to use. So the PWR mode just requires a ground, but it requires a constant ground. So you have to take it to ground and leave it there to keep it in power mode. And then underneath you've got black and yellow, and that is snow mode. That needs a momentary switch. So you just need to touch it and then it'll put it into snow mode. And you'll tell this because obviously it reduces the drive-by-wire throttle. So effectively you won't have full throttle when you put it into snow mode. Then we've got red, which is 2, so that gives out 12 volts when the vehicle is in 2. So remember, you got park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3 and 2. 4 and L are actually electronic signals. As you can tell from the original shifter, it went drive over the sideways to 4, then it went 3 and then 2 and then sideways to L. Okay, so that's why we have all this wiring here. So 2 is purely there because you need to use that 12 volts to give L, which is the yellow and black. You need 2 to give L 12 volts. Now the reason we do this is the same way that Toyota did it. It's so that the ECU can't get weird signals. What I mean by weird signals? If you just started to put a switch and decided just to use that switch to connect L with 12 volts, if you put it down into second, then flicked L, then you want it to go back up again into third, then the ECU is going to have 3 and L having 12 volts at the same time. It's not expecting that. It doesn't want it and it doesn't like it. So what we do is we provide you with 2. You can use that through a switch to provide L, and at least when you go from 2 to 3, that power gets cut. So there's no way that the ECU could ever have, 3 or D and L having 12 volts at the same time. Okay. Then in the middle we've got yellow red, and that is your kick down switch. So again, only the European models in the 1UZ VVT-i had kick down switches. So you just need to put a switch at the end of your accelerator pedal, and the other side of the switch goes to ground, the other side goes to the yellow red one. That's your kick down switch. Okay. Number 7 is blue and red, and that's D. So again, it's the same as 2 and L. It just gets 12 volts when you are in drive. And the reason we've included that is so that you can use 4. So 4 is the orange wire. So you can take D to one side of a switch and the other side of the switch to the orange wire. And then when you go from D and you want to put it in 4, you just then flick that switch and you do it. And as long as you do that D power, if you had to move down from D to 3, then 4 and D would lose power at the same time, therefore keeping the ECU happy. Next up, we've got number 10, which is white and blue. So white with a blue tracer. That is your brake switch. So the ECU requires 2 signals in relation to the brakes, one when it's pressed and one when it's not pressed. That is all taken care of inside the fuse box. We're using a relay to do that. And so all you need to do is provide 12 volts via your brake switch to the white with the blue wire, and that will then keep the ECU happy and it'll work exactly as you expect it to. Okay. Then we've got 11, which is blue now. That is cruise control. So because you run in the auto, you can have cruise control because it's got speed signals in there, and obviously it's drive-by-wire, so that's no problem at all. All you need to do is get a cruise control switch. You can get one from an ICE200 Auto, you can get one from a Camry, you can get one from a Lexus LS400, you can get one from LS430. Pretty much all around the same thing, sort of late 97 to 2000, and then all the way up to like 2005. All of those cruise control switches will work. One side of the cruise control switch just requires an earth, and the other side goes straight to this blue wire, and voila, then you have cruise control. And then the last few wires you see on here, that's just the OBD2 connector. So that's how you're going to carry out all your diagnostics. Now, the 1UZ-FE VVT-i, we can actually do the old-fashioned system, which I will show you at the very end when we talk about the codes, but you can read codes without a diagnostics machine, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And in your pack, you will be given all of those diagnostic codes, what they mean, and obviously how to rectify them. All right, so that's the entire layout. That is all the plugs that you need to connect. Obviously, you will have this with your harness, so don't stress about remembering everything, but I thought some people just find it easier. I go through this and then you get it all sorted out. So what we're going to do now is, next up is testing. So we're going to be turning the ignition on. We're going to be carrying out all the testing you see there, and then we're going to be starting it and carrying out all the testing that you see there. So I'm going to cut now. We're going to get it all fired up. We're going to get it up to temperature, and then we're going to test it. So bear with me. I'll be with you in a second. Right, so we're back now. So what we're going to be doing in this one is all the testing. So I'm going to quickly run through all the tests that we're going to carry out, and then we'll actually get into doing it. So first up, check engine light. So one, we're going to make sure that we get the check engine light on the fuse box. We're going to make sure we get the check engine light on the dash. That means that the wire coming out is working correctly, and the LED is working correctly in the fuse box. We're going to check the oil pressure light. Well, that's pretty straightforward. We've already got it on there, so we're happy with that. We'll check the charge light. So as soon as we put the ignition on, we should see one of the LEDs coming on for the charge light. We're going to go over to the OBD2 machine, make sure it connects via that plug over there, and make sure we're happy with that. Then we're going to go through the gear selector wiring. So inside the OBD2 machine, I'm going to be able to put the gear selector from park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3 and 2, and we'll be able to see all of that information there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch the L and 4 wires to 12 volts, and we'll also see that come active on the screen, so we know that's working exactly as it should. All right, and that's obviously part of the shifter and gear selector wiring. Then we're going to use the machine to test the fuel pump. So as I said, the fuel pump is controlled by the ECU. So again, I put the link earlier about how the fuel pump systems work. If you want to scroll back, you can have a look at that, and it'll explain things like the fact that it does not prime. So if you turn the ignition on, you're not going to hear any prime when I do it. It only comes on when you're cranking and when the crank sensor is getting a signal, okay? But we can turn it on by the OBD2 machine, so we will do that to make sure that's all working. Then what we're going to do is we're going to fire her up. So firing up, part of the test is the starter circuit. So what we'll do is, as part of the shifter wiring over there, I'm going to show that it doesn't start unless it's in park or neutral. But then we're going to start her up, test the starter, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come back here and we're going to have the ACIS system. So this valve is going to close. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link in the top corner to explain to you. I've done a video explaining exactly what this is, how it works. And what I always advise people to do is when you're pulling this intake off to put your sub harness underneath to the knock sensors in the starter motor, that is the perfect time to test the vacuum solenoid valve that is underneath here. If it doesn't work, that's a good time to replace it. Not after you put everything back, start it up, find that this doesn't go down, and then it doesn't work. And if it doesn't go down, you're losing a lot of low down torque. Okay, I mean a lot, a noticeable difference. So make sure that does work. If the solenoid doesn't work, you can test it on the bench by just providing 12 volts in the ground, and then basically, boom. If it doesn't work, replace it. If it does work, happy days, put everything back together. All right. Testing drive-by-wire. So what are we doing? We're just making sure that as soon as we touch the throttle, the engine actually revs. Because as you know, this is their early system, so you'll actually listen here. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So the very last section actually touches the throttle body, the throttle blade, and that gives you kind of like an override limpo mode. So even if your throttle shuts down, you can hold the accelerator 3/4 and more open, and you hear it'll actually move the throttle blade. So it gives you like a limpo mode, all right? Testing VVT-i solenoid. So we're going to go back into the OBD2 machine. That's going to allow us to test both oil control valves to make sure they are working as they should do. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the tach signal. So again, we'll see the tach signal coming through on the dash there. Then I'm going to pull all the injectors out one by one so we can hear it misfiring as I do that. So we know that every single cylinder is firing exactly as it should. AKA run smooth, pull it out, misfire, everything is fine. Then we're going to go through the code. So that's why I'm going to talk about the sections, how to read the codes without a diagnostic machine. And obviously you've got the diagnostic machine, and we'll go through, I think there's only 2 codes that'll always be there, and I'll let you know exactly what they are, and they'll be on the machine for us. All right. Okay, so let's get into it now. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the ignition on. So again, as per the last one, black with a red wire. All we're going to do is give that 12 volts. And as soon as we do, that wire comes up, obviously, because it's never easy. Okay, so now you can see we've got the LED on for that. Just going to put this 12 volts into here. I'm trying to do this all single-handedly. Okay, let's do that. They don't move. Right, okay, so we're getting the check engine light on the dash, and we're getting the LED on the fuse box, so we're super happy with that. Oil pressure light, obviously that is coming on anyway. What we'll look for is obviously when we start it, that will go off to show that the oil pressure switch is working exactly as it should. Same with the check engine light will go off as well, both of them. Right, next up we're going to check the charge light, which we've already seen over there, so you can see the little LED is coming alive there, and that again will go off when we start it. Next up, OBD2. So let's go back into here. I'm just going to click on function and system select, just so you can see as I do that. It's picking up as an LS400. All right, and if I come into here, I'm going to see some live data. If I go into data list, and anytime there, so 47 degrees coolant temp, 15 degrees intake air temp, 16% throttle, etc. So that is all working fine. Right, so the gear selector wiring. So what we're going to do now is we've got it in park at the moment. So I'm going to scroll down until we get to park neutral park switch, which is again a little bit confusing. What I'll actually do is I'm going to put a link in the top about how the park neutral switches work, just because they can be very confusing in terms of how the starter relay is in relation to the park neutral park switch and how the ECU does it. But effectively I've got P and park neutral park switch over here. So at the moment you'll see park neutral park switch is hopefully going to turn on. There you go. Right, so I've got it in park. I'm going to move it to reverse, so it's going to go off. And let's move it back into neutral. No, there you go. Now that goes back on again. Sorry, this machine is incredibly slow. Right, so now we're going to go over to the actual gears. Right, so here we are. Right, okay, so I'm going to go back into park. So you can see there we've got reverse. So I'm going to go park, reverse on the little selector. And there we go. Obviously we go back to neutral, and that will turn off. And I'm going to go into drive. Hope you can hear the clicks in the background here. Anytime now. No, let's go back into drive. There you go, so we've got drive, and then I'll click it back into third. And then we're going to go down into 2, which is the last gear position on there. Right, fantastic. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to provide the wires with 12 volts to put it into L. So you see we've got low over there. So we know that low is yellow and black. So I'm going to grab the yellow and black here, and I'm just going to touch it on 12 volts. Right, let's do this properly. Okay, so we're touching L on 12 volts. Oh, yellow and black. Idiot. Not black and yellow. Alright, so yellow and black. And then you see low is on. Notice how 2 goes off, even though I've got it in the gear position, and L goes on. That's how the ECU works it out, what it's doing. Right, so now we're going to go back to drive so we can see fourth. So we've got 2, 3, and that should be drive. There you go. Right, so 4 is orange. So we're going to grab orange. Okay. And you should see now fourth. There you go. See, drive is off, fourth is on. So that is working exactly as I expected to, and as I disconnect it, Sorry, machine is incredibly slow. Okay, so that's perfect. So we know all the gears are working and the ECU is picking up exactly as it should. All right. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to try and start it. So you can see now I'm in park. So I'm going to move it to reverse. Okay. So you can see now reverse is on. Now then, if I touch the black with the yellow wire to 12 volts, you'll see it won't try and start. So you can see that I've got absolutely nothing from there. So that's the park neutral switch working as it should. I'm just going to turn it back to park, and you'll see now. There you go. So now the vehicle will only start when it's in park or neutral. So something might catch people out. Just remember that if you're trying to start on the floor, you do need to put the park neutral switch in. I put that link before about how they work. So just be careful about, you know, what you're doing. There are effectively two. There's the separate park and neutral signals that are going to the ECU, but then there's two completely separate signals that are in relation to the starter relay. So do just remember that in terms of the park neutral switch. Okay. So next up, we're going to go into the fuel pump. So we're just going to go into active tests. All right, so we've got fuel pump, relay, fuel pump. If you watch my video, you'll know exactly why that is. So we're just going to go into fuel pump for our test now. And as I do, put it on. So you can actually hear the relay click in. And you can probably hear the fuel pump working there. There you go, fantastic. Okay, so that's everything on the ignition side that we're testing. We're happy with all of that now. All of the signals are coming through exactly as we expected to. So what we're going to do now is we are going to start it up. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab my earphones. So give me 1 second while I do that, because it is very loud. Right, okay. So I'm going to continue to talk through the whole process, and we'll go through all of these tests one by one. So quick, briefly, starter is nice and simple. ACIS, we're going to make sure the valve is opening. Drive-by-wire, we're going to rev it just to make sure that that is actually working. VVT-i solenoids, we'll test on the machine. TAC, we'll go over to the cluster, make sure that's working. Injectors and coils, pull them all out one by one. And then codes, we're going to go through what codes you should have, how to read the codes without the diagnostic machine as well. Okay, so nice and simple. She's in park. Let's fire her up. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's all good. ACIS, that's all good. Drive-by-wire. That's all good. Then we're going to do VVT-i solenoids. And we bank one. Right, fantastic. So I just killed the fuel pump there, so you can see as well that these are fuel pulsation dampers. You have one on each bank. These are not regulated, so they don't regulate it any way. The VVT-i, both 1UZ and 3UZ, run a deadhead system, so they require regulation externally. That's why you see I have a little VW 4-bar fuel filter with built-in regulator over there. That just keeps it at a constant 4-bar. Now these screws will rise up when you have fuel pressure. That's a nice, quick, easy way to tell if you've got fuel actually at the rails. All right, just a little useful tip for you guys. Right, so now codes. What codes should we have? So if I'm going to go and do DTC or diagnostic trouble codes over here, obviously we're going to have all the codes for the solenoids and the speed sensors and all of that type of jazz. But bank 1 sensor 2, bank 2 sensor 2. So that'll be 27 and 29 if you do the flash codes. Again, they're not plugged in. As you can clearly see, they do not cause a check engine light and they do not affect the running of the engine. So there's no need to worry about them. It'll just mean every time you check codes, you're going to have 27 and 29. All right, 21 and 28 are the two main oxygen sensors. 27, 29 are the secondary ones. Now the only other codes we've got here, obviously because the gearbox is missing, so we've got shift solenoid 1, 2, 3 and 4, and we've got solenoid lockup, SLT and SLN shift solenoid. Okay, so that's the only other codes that are on there. So once you plug the gearbox in, the only two codes you should see are that one over there, P0141 and P0161. Only two codes there should be. If there's any other codes, there is a problem. All right, if there's a problem, your check engine light will come on. So do wire that up. It'll let you know exactly what's happening as soon as it happens. All right, so how do you read codes without a diagnostic machine? Well, basically Morse code. So all we're going to do is, you'll see in your fuse box here, there is a place where it looks like a fuse should be. Don't put a fuse in there. There isn't meant to be a fuse in there. You will get the paperwork with your thing, with the whole fuse box layout, telling you what each relay is and what it's called, and what each fuse is and what size it should be in terms of whether it's 5 amp, 10 amp, 15 amp, 20 amp. You'll see that this one here is labeled TC for trouble codes. So all you're going to basically do is take this fuse out here, which is STA. In other words, the car won't start if you remove this fuse, by the way. And then effectively what you're going to do is you're going to bridge that over there, and you see the check engine light's gone off and it's going to start flashing. So we're going to have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 27. And you're going to have 1, 2, and you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. That's 29. So as I said, then you're going to have a long pause, and it's going to go 1, 2, and then it's going to go 27. So I'm not going to go through that again. But effectively, once you get to the end of the codes, you're going to have a nice long pause, and then it's going to start circling again. All right. I do have a video about how to do diagnostics. It's on a 1UZ non-VVT-i, but exactly the same principles apply here. The only benefit here is that you have OBD2, so you can get an OBD2 diagnostic machine and you can plug it in and you can see all the live data exactly like I saw there. You can tell what gear it's in, you can tell all of that information. All right. So by far, this is the best route. It's going to help you immensely. Like for instance, on this one, it'll have a code 14 and a 15. Now, code 14 means there's a misfire, but unfortunately, it's a group of 4 cylinders. And 15 is the other 4 cylinders. So you'll know you have a misfire, but you only be able to narrow it down to one of 4 cylinders. On a diagnostic machine, it'll tell you exactly which cylinder is misfiring. So again, that is the benefit of that. But if you're in a pinch, you don't have a machine, your check engine light comes on. It's as simple as that. Move a fuse over, boom. Second thing that does, when you move that fuse over there and you bridge TC, so it's TC to ground, that all gets taken care of in there. What's that going to do is put the ECU into diagnostic mode. It's wonderful, it gives you all the codes, that's fantastic, but that's not all it does. What it is going to do as well is it's going to lock the timing on the engine at 10 degrees. So if you suspect that you have a problem with timing, think a tooth is missed, or you've just done a timing belt and you're not 100% sure and it's not starting for some weird reason, what you can do is you can put the thing into diagnostic mode, grab yourself a timing light and put it on cylinder 1 coil. Now, not all timing lights work with just the wiring of the coil. If not, you'll have to basically run an old HT lead from the actual coil to the spark plug itself and use that. But you'll see down here, you've got markings 0, 5, 10, and 15. And on there's your marking over there. So get yourself some Tipex, or I don't know what you guys call it, correction fluid or whatever it is. Make that nice and white so you can see it. Whiten up these so you can see them nicely, and then you can check with the timing light. That should be at 10 degrees when you have that bridged. Which brings on to my next point. If you leave the fuse in there, you're going to be stuck at 10 degrees. That's not going to be good for power. You're going to be incredibly down on power. So please don't leave the fuse in there, because that is going to be really bad and it's going to suck and you're going to have no power from there. So please remember, for diagnostics only, once you've finished, get rid of it. Okay. But that is about it. What I'm going to do from now on with the videos is I'm going to leave some part numbers down for things that I think you should consider changing when you're doing your conversion. Mainly things like the coolant temp sensor. All right, so they get old and they go wrong and they can cause you many, many problems over there. If you don't have a mass airflow sensor, I'll give you the part number for that to make sure you get the correct one, because they do require these ones, and I call them bullet because they look like a bullet when you look in there. Make sure that you've got the opening holes facing towards where the air is coming in. On the other side is a completely flat surface. So if you've got this the wrong way around, that'll happen there. Make sure that if you have your MAF connected, that you've actually got a pipe connected to the intake. Remember, these are calculating airflow into the engine to calculate how much fuel to give. If you've got the mass airflow sensor plugged in, but dangling down here with nothing connecting to the throttle body, it's not measuring any air. So this thing will not start if you've got the MAF sensor plugged in, but not connected to the throttle body, so it's not measuring air. You're better off just leaving it disconnected if you want to start it without all the intake pipe on. It takes a little while to start, but she does start without it. But if you have that plugged in, she's not going to start, because the engine's going to assume you've got no air coming in, so it's going to give you no fuel. All right. So coolant temp sensor, MAF over there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think there's anything else really to do. The only other advice that I can give you, especially if you guys have had your engine for a long time and it's been standing in the shed, take the injectors out, ultrasonic cleaner, 20 to 40 minutes. It does wonders, trust me on that one. So it's always useful to have nice clean injectors. So try and avoid chasing stupid issues. So clean your injectors, make sure they're fine, make sure your coils are firing, make sure you've got new spark plugs in there. On the VVT-i engine, do change your timing belt. These are an interference engine. If you don't change your timing belt, or if you're not 110% sure of the condition of the timing belt, not just mileage but also years, if this has been sitting on the floor for 2 years not moving, change your timing belt as well. All right, I'll put a part number for the timing belt in there as well, but you can find loads of kits on Rock Auto that I buy from as well. Very, very good, really decent price. And Rock Auto, even if you're in the UK, they take care of all the duties and customs fees when you order, so you've got to pay nothing when it arrives at your door. But thank you guys for watching. That is everything there. We do have a whole bunch of helpful videos if you guys want to go and take a sneak peek. We have a playlist called The More You Know, so it's just little videos that I do. I've obviously linked in a couple of videos as we've gone along. But for now, James, let's get this off and we'll get it boxed up and we'll get over to you so you can get it in your vehicle. And everyone else, thanks for watching and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.